15 years ago won't buy much of anything here today.
And why the millennial generation is starting to give up because they can't afford to get a good job or own a house.
8 million Venezuelans voting for this assembly, saying it's actually less than 3.
It is. And people are going to start rioting in the streets.
Was reported to have asked Putin for military support that would help him stay in power.
We will make America safe again. And yes, together, we will make America great again.
And they ignore him. And 8 more years goes by till Bernie himself finally admits to his sons, hey, I've been running a Ponzi scheme.
Does its dominance mean it can use the alliance for its own ends?
Since 1981, bond yields, also known as coupon rates, have just gone down and down and down.
The Federal Reserve note will be your biggest financial liability.
Sunday night live stream. How's everybody doing this evening? So I wanted to just log on briefly because I've got a few articles I wanted to share, and then also share my thoughts, and as well as get your thoughts on where we're at and where we're going, and how this current week, Sunday, as it comes to an end, marks the beginning of the end as far as how this accommodative fast cash or thumbnail that I got to put together marks the beginning of the end for what we have known as, just conventional monetary policy. With this whole repo situation this past week, with the Fed rate cut, spells the beginning of the end, because there will be no road to recovery once or as the Federal Reserve continues to make liquidity or funding available for distressed institutions that lack liquidity. So I got a couple of thoughts I want to share with that, and how ultimately what they're saying is we're going to accommodate whatever's needed to keep this thing going. So imagine if you were a corporate CEO or a big financial institution, hedge, whatever you are on the higher ups. If you know that the Federal Reserve will do whatever it takes to keep this thing going, then they're going to be as accommodative as far as being able to fund your malfeasance, if I can use that word, continuously. So there'll be no real need to pay the debt back that you borrow. So basically, it's a payday lending aspect minus the need to pay it back. So yes, I got a couple thoughts I want to share with that, because we are, in very interesting times. And so starting tomorrow, when this whole, lending, 24-hour lending period begins again, we want to see what type of funds will be needed, but it's going to be in the billions. And I want to share a graph of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet of where they were supposed to be tightening, but it looks like they're going to be easing, along with a couple other articles. But before I move any further, welcome to RT Live Talk Sunday night. It is the 22nd day of the month of September, and just want to check in and see what's up with you guys, find out what's going on out here in the world, and then also share my thoughts. So as always, if we have any new viewers in the chat, let me know where you're watching from. I'll definitely acknowledge your presence. Then above me, there's a number, 313-462-0027. Give me a shout and chime in on the conversation this evening. So let me acknowledge a couple people's presence thus far. We got Spirit King, low blood pressure. We got Excalibur, Dennis from the NYC. We got James from Texas, Scott, Bryant, Lean Bean. We got Antonio. We got Hey Kool-Aid. Hey Mike, how you guys doing? Corpus Christi in the building. Johnny Deep, how you doing, my friend? Alan. Okay, so I appreciate you guys taking time to hang out with me this evening. Just want to be quick and short, but share a couple of different articles that you might be aware of or might not be, and then link it all together as to how I think we should begin approaching the days moving ahead, because monetary intervention and easing and basically legalized counterfeiting is about to run rampant, and there will be no way of withdrawing these accommodations. So it's going to be problematic. And so while the central banks of the world, or the Federal Reserve primarily, is easing to keep this expansion going, I think it is financially irresponsible, and this is my opinion, on your part, or if you're new to the channel or new to this whole monetary awakening that we're going through now, to continue to do prior financial practices, being responsible, doing all the things you were taught and told to do to prepare for your financial future, it's very risky. And it's basically irresponsible on your part to not make adjustments along with what the central bankers are doing as far as accommodating all the funds needed to keep the banking sector and financial institutions going without regard of the people who hold that very same currency that they're bringing into circulation, or bringing into existence rather. It's not in circulation yet, but it will be, that they're bringing into existence without even worrying about the consequences of their own actions, because the very two mandates that the Federal Reserve cling on to. So every time Jerome Powell gets up and does a Q&A or whatever, he reemphasizes the mandates of constant price inflation, or I'm sorry, stable price and maximum employment. So I believe in the long run, as a result of all this monetary madness, the very two things that he said they're trying to that they're responsible for doing will be the very same things that become problematic with the global economy. It's going to be maximum unemployment and unimaginable inflation in regards to consumer goods and things that everybody needs and lives upon daily. So that being the case, welcome to the chat. So I want to dive right in and share with you a couple articles. And so I appreciate, I think one or two articles were shared with me earlier. So I wanted to do this live stream on Friday, but I didn't get a chance to do it. So let me jump right into some of the articles. And so this is from today. So this is fresh out the press from Zero Hedge. And it's kind of telling. It's kind of interesting when you have one of the two big to fail banks that comes out or publicizes what's currently going on, when the whole monetary system and everything that the policies have been implemented have been created to do was to keep this very same bank as well as the other banks liquid so that they can function and stay alive and continue to grow. And so when you guys says it's official, Bank of America now calls what is coming QE4. And then if you thumb through this article here, you'll get a lot of visual aids here. And the author of this, I think this was a combination of a couple things that was put together here. But these visual aids here, if you thumb through it, give you a good idea as to the unofficial announcement of QE4 has been implemented as of this past week, with this whole repurchasing of treasuries to provide liquidity for corporations and financial institutions that all of a sudden lack the ability to, I guess, meet corporate taxes in this particular quarter. And so they needed a little extra funding. And so one of the questions I wonder is, how can an institution that has received so much accommodative policies over the last several years not all of a sudden be able to pay their taxes or whatever other funding they were supposed to pay, and they lack the liquidity to do it? And so that lets me know that I would imagine all the corporate buybacks that's been taking place for the last several years has been a part of why they don't have the funds, or were not willing to use their own reserves to make their taxes or whatever obligations they had. And so who better to step in than the Federal Reserve to make sure that the funding's there? And that's a problem, because these institutions, whoever they are, I wish we can get a list of whoever, whichever institutions are actually utilizing these funding. I wish we can get a list of them. And I would imagine the institutions that are taking advantage of this opportunity happens to be globally systemically important banks, and those that are probably one or two tiers away from those banks there, because they've used their proceeds, in my humble opinion, for corporate and the derivatives and all those gambling mechanisms that they've created to keep those things afloat. And they've come back to the Federal Open Market Committee to get some cash fast in advance. So here's a good article here. But yet, when Bank of America mentions that what's coming is QE4, that's right up the alley of all the commentators out there that's been saying quantitative easing is coming, is coming, is coming. As of this current week, with this current reaction to this repo situation, QE is already in a full effect. And then I'll go right into this next visual aid here. Oh, wrong one. Where is it at? So yeah, as a part of this article here, this is the federalreserve.gov. And so I typed in their recent balance sheet trends. And so here you can see all the excess currency that's been brought into existence since the great financial situation happened back in 2008. And we got QE1 here, then we got, I think, 2 here, then 3. And then you go for last little injection was, let me see, the beginning of 2015 was the last round of QE3. And so rewind 4 years now, a little bit over 4 years. It's been slowly but surely diminishing a little bit. They've been able to get rid of that stuff, or basically suck out of the economy. I saw something moving, so I thought I had some sound. So with that being the case, this is going to be a, I don't know how we've been going for 14 minutes. There's been no sound. So let me check in with the chat, because if this has been the case, if that's been the case, phone is unavailable, microphone blew a load. So the mic's talking away. Oh my goodness. Okay, so for everybody that's been tuning in, I apologize. So once again, I got caught up and got a lot of stuff in my mind. So this was pretty much 14 minutes of wasted nothing. But we're here now. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to go back and edit all this out, and I'm going to chop out that first 14 minutes so it will not be present. So I'm going to pick up with my rant right now. So for those that are tuning in, I'm going to start over right now. Okay. So I apologize for that. So welcome to RT Live Talk. My name is Mike, the host of RT Live Talk late night. And so got a couple issues that I wasn't aware of, but we're back here. And so for those that are watching, I appreciate the chiming in. I appreciate the love offerings. Continue to let me know what's going on in the chat here. Call in if you guys got some thoughts you want to share. So I'll take it back to the beginning, and I'll share with you everything all over again. And of course, it only get better. So tonight I want to log in. Basically, well, I won't be long for real now, but I wanted to share some thoughts because we've marked the beginning of the end of normal, practical, monetary practices from the central bank. So from the thumbnail you guys saw, cash fast. So officially, as of this week, the whole the payday lending thing came to mind when I drew that thumbnail, because you have when you got financial institutions too big to fail banks all of a sudden don't have enough liquidity. Where do all the funds go? The whole system has been designed for them. So either they've utilized those funds for fraudulent / criminalistic type of activities, or a lot of paybacks and kickbacks and things of that nature. So if the funding's not there to meet your corporate taxes supposedly, then something's wrong, because the whole system is designed to keep them liquidated and to keep them profitable. So by Jerome Powell and the FOMC coming in being the savior, they're basically saying that no matter what you do, institution, no matter what you do out there, we're going to come in and provide liquidity for you, because they can't afford to let this expansion in. So if you're sitting on the board of one of these too big to fail companies, institutions, whatever, and if you know that you can't fail, because if you fail, the system crumbles, what type of incentive did that give you to then next week, next day, whatever your situation might be, to just borrow more? And here's the biggest issue I have. If you can't meet your obligations on day one because of a lack of funding, or you choose not to use your own reserves, then in practical terms, if you can't pay your bills up front, how will you borrowing within a 24-hour period to pay your bills provide the liquidity you need to pay back your loan? So that lets me know that there will be no need to repay these loans back, because if the institutions decide not to, or they decide to prolong it and kick it off a little longer, or whatever they choose to do, the system is designed to keep this thing moving forward. Therefore, debt really won't be extinguished the way that it is for consumers and just the average person out on the street, who, if you take out a loan, you got to put some serious collateral up, or you'll lose whatever it is you own and possess. But yet these banks, they don't stand to lose anything, because they run this system, and they keep this system run together. So I want to share a couple articles, and I'll actually get caught up with the chat, and so you guys can get involved with this. So as always, let me know in the chat. I appreciate you guys communicating with me. So I will edit that portion out, but I want to get right into some articles that I want to share, and then get your guys' thoughts on it. And so let me see, pull up an article right here. A couple things that came across, and so I showed this, but I'll show it again. And so here we have one of the too big to fail banks of which the system is kind of designed to help them out. When they're coming out saying that it's official, Bank of America now calls what is coming QE4, and then they show a lot of visual aids and things of that nature to kind of paint a picture as to how much would be needed. So they're saying, this is what they're saying here. In order to provide enough liquidity for all the institutions that's in a pinch right now, they're going to need $400 billion in reserves for the IOER, or the interest rates, what is it? I just looked it up. I forgot what it's called, but the IOER. I just looked it up. But anyway, so they're saying here, Bank of America, whoever put this together, is talking about $400 billion is needed in order to kind of just bring things up to snuff. And once again, if you don't have the funds now, where are those funds going to come from? Everybody owe each other in this system, but nobody's liquid enough to actually meet their obligations. So basically, they're bringing money into existence without the demand for it to be paid back, which, you know, in any other system, in any other world, activity like that will be considered gambling, and a lot of people will go to jail. But because of these too big to fail banks here, they're going to be good. And just to show you where this is all heading, I want to go back to the to this visual aid here, or actually from the Federal Reserve, showing their activities. So the Federal Reserve has expanded their balance sheet, which ultimately reflects in currency as well as digital and physical. And so here we have the whole shebang from 2008 to current. And as you can see, we got QE1, QE2, QE3, and then they've been tightening relatively within the last year. And so we see the decrease in their balance sheet of them basically pulling liquidity out of the markets and returning those collaterals back to their original owners. And so here we have activity as of the last week. And this is what's most alarming, because as of this is not updated, so this is September 18th. So this is not, so it's higher now since then. And so it went from 3.76 trillion to 3.84 trillion, and this is outdated, so it's a lot higher now. But that's a 75 billion increase of currency brought into existence out of nowhere, that's been put into creation and purchasing of treasuries and whatnot, and providing liquidity for institutions. And so the whole point of this evening is to let you know where this is. Of course, everyone kind of knows where this is going, but one thing I mentioned that was not heard earlier because of the lack of volume is that hello caller, which day were you calling from?
Hey, what's happening? From Richmond, Virginia. This is Mike at Stack Metals.
How you doing, my friend? What's on your mind tonight?
I'm good. I just want to say, like, you know, for most people out there, we see a lot of what's going on, and you realize that, you know, looking at things, we get robbed through inflation. And so, you know, basically, metals is the only thing that increases in value as the dollar decreases. So as far as like retirement or anything like that, or like long-term savings, you have to do it in precious metals, or either you lose your purchasing power.
Correct.
So like that's my big thing is, you know, just looking at history, and gold and silver has basically been real money over, you know, the longevity of thousands of years.
Yeah.
Where everything else, you know, fiat currency and that stuff always loses value and always returns back to its, you know, intrinsic value, which is zero.
Correct. I do agree.
You know, that's just my thing. I want people to, you know, to kind of pay attention to and look at, you know, a lot of history and stuff like that for people and whatnot. But, you know, if you really want to know what's going on and, you know, you really want to better yourself, look at history and look at what's happened throughout time. And, you know what I mean, prepare yourself for what's going to happen again, because it always, you know, kind of repeats itself.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think I'm looking at you on the chat too, so I'm probably a little bit behind, because I called in and you answered right away, and the chat's a little bit behind it, and the sound was out for a minute, but
yeah.
Yeah, I listen to you all the time, so I figured I'd call in and just got my little 2 cents in.
Appreciate you, man. Well, thank you. I appreciate you calling in, and definitely, you know, you're in tune and you're aware, and you're, you know, just referencing history itself lets you know where things have gone and where we're going to be heading with this. So definitely, weight is a true measurement of value long term. So I appreciate you for sharing that, my friend.
All right, man. Yeah, good talking to you. I'll be listening in. Take it easy.
All right, be good. Appreciate you.
All right, go on.
Yeah. So I appreciate the call in, and so yeah, I started off tonight with no sound. Got really deep into my rant, but nobody can hear me. So trying to recover basically everything I mentioned. But yeah, so when seeing stuff like this and seeing within just a week an increase, and so even around here, this was 3 weeks ago. So once they announced, the end of tightening, they instantly began the purchasing treasuries directly. So they are basically already monetizing government debt. So if you know that there'll always be a buyer of your debt to fund you, i.e. the United States government, then you can believe that in the next couple of weeks, because I think right now, next whatever we have the so-called debt ceiling or debt expansion, whatever it is going on right now, but this thing right here, 3.84, and this is already old. It's going to touch more. It's going to go past 4 trillion, in my opinion, in October, because there's going to be more issues coming. And then I want to share another article with you. Goldman Sachs says the market is about to get wild in October. And so here we go, another too big to fail bank coming out. Just, I guess, I'm not sure if this is called being truthful or just, trying to scare and cause panic in the markets. But they're basically telling us, and how October is going to be a very volatile month, because historically, they're just talking about here, since, averaging since 1928, October is usually that time frame where, for whatever reason, they go through the explanations here. But, they said, quote, "We believe it's a critical period for many investors and companies that manage performance to calendar year end." Then it talks about the volatility index and all the issues with the treasury yield or whatever. So here we got Bank of America saying QE4 is coming. It's already here. Goldman Sachs talking about October is going to be wild. And then the factor in, they talking about the trade war situation as well. The meeting is supposed to be coming up, and I don't really follow it like that, because regardless, there's no solving that in a correct, polite manner. And so that's going to be a joke in and of itself. But yet, back to the whole cash fast. So the thumbnail came about because it gave me the sense of the payday lending aspect. You know how the payday lending is offered as a solution. It's offered as a relief for distressed consumers that don't have enough cash at the end of the week or the end of the month or whatever. And so, especially in inner city communities, it's more so like, you need extra $500. We can provide some liquidity for. We can get you cash fast up to $5,000 a month. And I'm thinking like, man, they've used that to sucker in millions of people who already were in a pinch. The people who use those services can't afford probably their current situation. That's why they're in a pinch. But nevertheless, they are suckered into going to those cash fast services, those payday lending services, and they get deeper in a hole. And I thought about that because I'm thinking like, basically what they're doing is the FOMC is basically saying that, we don't want this thing to go under, so we're about to offer a little liquidity ourselves. But the only difference between the consumer being lent, being offered money, and these institutions here, Jerome Powell in his open market trading desk, only difference is these people here they don't have to technically pay it back, because if they don't have it up front now, how will they have it in 24 hours? Like what? Somebody let me know. I don't know the open market operations behind the scene that well, but I'm imagining if you ain't got the funds now, you're gonna have it in 24 hours. You're gonna have $2 billion, $3 billion, $4 billion by tomorrow? No. So once again, it'll be pushed out, extended, or we just go ahead and add it to your tab, because we don't need this thing to crumble. And so this thumbnail, when I thought about this, I'm not even going to put this together, because it's very similar to payday lending minus the payday lending, because they're payday giving away, and I put at the bottom, available stimulus up to $75 billion a day, ultra low rates. So rates as low as 1.80%, but yet your credit card charging you 17%, 20%, depending on what your credit score like. But yet this is I've had to put that together because I thought that was kind of humorous. But anyway, enough rant, man. Let me get back into the chat. I apologize to everybody for that first couple minutes for those that came in late. I'm gonna definitely edit that out if I can. But what else we got going on here? Give me some thoughts in the chat. We got it says with a name like Spirit King was understandable. Okay, we got people going back and forth talking to each other. Silver and gold eagles not as required. No, is required silver 10 ounces more. It says, damn, the Repubs are crooks. Hopefully the coming conflict will not involve China. Yeah, but I find it very hard to believe that China will just sit by if the U.S. happens to intervene in Iran like it's looking like this week. This week will be the telling week as to whether or not there's intervention in this whole Iran-Saudi Arabia supposed bombing of oil, the oil facilities or whatever, because I've been hearing much more stuff about that, and it's just looking even sketchier by the day. Even sketchier by the day. What else we got? It says, when money is digital, the fractional reserve system works very fast, extremely fast. Legalized loans shrinking, taking advantage of the poor and people who don't understand how much they are paying. Very true. And that's another thing. Those payday loan facilities, I imagine that the interest rate is probably unbelievably high to where the system is designed to get you caught up in it, just like with credit cards in general and all those artificial and fake what is it called, like advertisements or gimmicks to get you suckered in. And unless you actually are diligent and know how to actually have the discipline to manage your own finances, you're gonna get suckered in one way or another, whether it be with cash back or free travel miles or whatever it is. All that stuff is put in play to draw you in, hoping you get hooked and miss just one payment, and then they got you. What that flood the market with greenbacks. James, we were talking about what's up with China and Russia dumping the dollar. Yeah, so I've been seeing more of that. And actually, I'm trying to think. I was watching a commentator or interview or something like that, and the question of China and Russia dumping treasuries having increased dramatically over the last several years is all a part of their strategy, because China and Russia has a interconnected strategy that they're utilizing. And so ultimately the dumping of treasuries, i.e. greenbacks, has been to fund and prepare their own New World Order as far as that One Belt, One Road. So they also, the One Belt, One Road initiative, as well as all the developments in Africa, has all been funded with treasuries or China and Russia's reserves. So they've been putting those reserves to good use by building infrastructure in the region they plan on operating fully, and then and also in Africa. So imagine this: taking out a loan to build up to build up your own infrastructure. Period. Like you're building a whole community of buildings, railroad trains and cabs and all types of, even the maritime, even the waterways. They've been helping refurbish ports around the world with dollars. And then when they are done, they're going to say no dollars are accepted here. And they're going to roll out whatever it is they want to roll out. It's more than likely going to be the renminbi or something of that nature, or a basket of something or another. But we'll see. But low blood pressure says, Mike, when would you trade in your metals for something tangible, ounce to whatever other assets? All right, good question. James, appreciate the love offering. Think that will trigger a war? Hands down. And we'll probably, God forbid, we'll probably have a war before that. And so this whole Iran situation is going to be real defining in history, because not only are the monetary policy completely ended, what I believe people should be considering as far as practical financial matters. Like one thing I hinted at, and low blood pressure, I get your question when you guys can hear me, is that with what we're seeing now, we're seeing a permanent increase in our currency being brought into circulation. It's not going to hit the mainstream just yet. It's going to be, used to prop up the system in all types of ways behind the scenes, and especially the derivatives and all that stuff that is technical. When it implodes, all that funds is going to go into that. But it's going to be hard to continue to put funds into things without it leaking out. It's going to leak out somewhere. Primary example. So I posted something the other day in the community about this week currently, the liquidity spigot has been turned on, and it's going to be turned on. They cannot cut the liquidity spigot off, to where there's going to be a constant flow of funds going to wherever it is that shows signs of things drying up. So whatever looks like it's dry, they're going to try to flood it so that it can, not be the catalyst for this complete meltdown. So if you continue to just pump, and allocate and put it every places, eventually there's going to be a flood, because there is such thing as just too much water, too much liquidity before it overflows and becomes problematic. And once all this liquidity from this liquidity spigot is now officially on, it will never, they will not be able to turn this thing off. Because what we've seen over the last decade, they brought in 3 injections, they cut it on, they blasted up for 3 times, QE1, QE2, QE3. Now QE4 is going to be permanent, and we're witnessing it right now. So what will keep this liquidity from spilling over into consumer goods and spilling over to Main Street and it not impacting prices? And as I mentioned, you guys didn't hear me, the very 2 mandates that the Federal Reserve is responsible for, according to their mandates, is maximum employment and price stability. Those 2 things right there will be the very things that they screw up big time. They're going to end up being maximum unemployment when all this spillover happens, because it's going to be very problematic for corporations just to do business in general when trade and all that stuff is impacted by higher prices, because employment is going to be problematic. If corporations aren't making funds, it's going to be problematic. And then what's the other one? Price stability. We're going to see much higher inflation. Therefore, those 2 mandates are gone. So we have I think I have a caller here. Let me see if I do. I don't know if I do. Do I? Yes. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from? Hello? Anybody there? All right. Give me a call back. I'll get you on here. And let me get to those questions, though. So once again, I get caught up and I get ranting again. So low blood pressure. Your question was, at what point will you get rid of your metals? Good, great question. So my thoughts is, based upon history and seeing where we're at now, with this permanent liquidity spigot being turned on, they will not be able to turn that thing off, because the markets and institutions will become dependent upon liquidity. As we see, we're starting to see a dependence upon excess reserves and capital for everyday operations. So they'll never be able to cut it off, in my opinion. And because they can't cut it off, it's just a matter of time for prices to start going up on the everyday needs, impacting metals down the line, and every other thing is considered an asset. But I think the best time to probably look to get out of some metals is when the currency, the Federal Reserve note, which could be a couple years. So I'm thinking this liquidity they can still pump up the markets and pump up everything for some time. So this could be 1, 2, 3. This could probably go on a little bit. But when it happens, it will be because the price of your metals will be beyond affordable, extraordinarily, like on some $1 million for an ounce, because of hyperinflation. And if we get something like that, then that's a time where they're going to have to issue a new currency. And so I personally wouldn't look to get out of metals until they are in a bubble themselves, which we wouldn't see, in my opinion, until there's an issuance of another currency that would need to be adjusted, because after the reserve currency status of the dollar, Federal Reserve note is gone, we're going to be solely dependent upon an isolated currency. It still may look like the Federal Reserve note, but it will not be respected globally. Therefore, when it comes time to do international activity, it won't be a standard anymore. And because it won't be a standard, I don't think the Federal Reserve note will be something that people will want to hold apart from living in this country. Therefore, it's going to be some devaluations with it. And at that time, metals will continue to go up even more in the current dollar or in the new issued whatever they're going to try to give us. So metals will go up for a while, even in the midst of a reset or restructuring or a new issuance of some type of currency, fiat, paper, or digital. So it's one of the things where until you know 100% that metals are in a bubble, and that will be some time into whatever they're going to issue us down the line. So I'm looking at, and this is just me. I'm ranting, but I apologize, because as thoughts come, I'm looking at 2020 to 2030 being a very unpleasant time frame, of which during that 10-year period, I think that we're going to go through a lot of changes to where we still won't be able to discover the true nominal price of a metal, because we're going to be measuring it in a currency that's dying severely. So I don't think, whatever it is, we won't be saying $1 million an ounce or $100,000 an ounce, because we won't be utilizing the word dollar with whatever it is we're going to be measuring it in value-wise. Or whatever the international standard of an ounce of silver or gold will be. It won't be utilizing the word dollar. We may be using the word dollar here, but the international standard will not be how many ounces for whatever in dollar terms. So I think we still got, I think, after this next decade, 2031, 2032, things might settle down. And that's just a worst case scenario. I hope I'm completely off. But yet, in a worst case scenario, give it 10 years before you begin thinking about looking to really unload, because things will not be settled at all internationally for several years. And I'm just gonna go on a limb and say a decade, because a decade seems like it's something that seems more realistic, because we're dealing with decades of manipulation, decades of indebtedness, decades of activity that will take time to be ironed out. And it's going to be global. So it's not like just one country. Like in Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina, they go through it every couple years, give or take. But this is going to be an entire monetary reshuffling of order and everything. So that's my thought there. So give it a decade plus to even start talking about unloading. And then, yeah. So my thoughts. There's another question from James. Think what would trigger a war? Think that would trigger a war. So I'm assuming that's my talk about the Iran situation. I'm hoping it's not. I'm hoping this week will be the defining week. Like this week is another big week. So tomorrow morning when the repo market's open, the desk, if they start giving out billions again, it's on with the QE continuously. But then as far as this whole UN situation, so Saudi Arabia and it's coming to the UN to plead their case, and Iran all of a sudden can't get visas to get here, so they won't be able to defend themselves. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from? Hello? Going once? Going twice? All right. So, yeah. So keep it moving right along. Let me get to the next question. I see Argentina, Zimbabwe. I see a couple names thrown out there. Bulgaria, Soviet Union. I'll wait for 2 ounces per acre for 2 ounces per acre of farmland. Because we will not be able to actually put like this. In regards to price, the standard for the world has been Federal Reserve notes for 100 years, give or take, after World War II and whatever. And so the standard going forward, what is a measurement of value for an ounce in a world where all fiat currencies imploding? The dollar will probably be the last one, of course, but if all fiat currencies are going belly up, then how do you determine what an ounce is worth? And what measurement do you use it in? What denomination, what currency do you use to measure the value of an ounce? And especially if you are the mindset that gold and silver, they are money, so everything is measured against it. So we're trying to go back now to measure gold and silver in a paper, in a nominal term. There is no way of discovering a actual amount of paper units that you can use to acquire an ounce. And a good example of how distorted it has become is that an ounce of gold currently measured in the reserve currency that we are in now, Federal Reserve note, it costs 1,500 pieces of paper for 1 ounce. Whereas in 30, 40 years ago, an ounce of gold, and 40 years ago, it was illegal for you to own. Up until 1974, it's illegal for citizens to own gold bullion. And so it was $42 an ounce. So it took 42 pieces of paper to get 1 ounce, and now it takes 1,500 pieces of paper. And of course, all this, JP Morgan, market rigging, silver situation, all that stuff is entertaining. But as always, too big to fail bankers don't go to jail. So don't anticipate nothing really coming out of that at the same time that all this is happening. But so how do you actually put a number on an ounce is what it's going to boil down to. So yeah, just my thoughts there, man. Laura Spade says, Mike, I am hearing people are selling their silver bullion now because the prices have risen. Wise or no? Me personally, I'm holding and buying more. Great question there, and I think my opinion would be that the people who are selling, they're selling because of either they're traders and they probably purchased 17, it go up to 19 or $2. You're like, oh, those are traders. People who are aware of monetary history and understand the value and understand the true nature of metals in this current environment, they're not selling. And so if you have the viewpoint that gold and silver are money and everything else on top of that is a speculative object, i.e. like fiat currencies, because they come and go, no single currency has lasted longer than the current Federal Reserve note, which has been in circulation 106 years. It's the only one. So that's 0.1 out of 99.999 other currencies that have come and gone. Even the sterling, the British pound, is still in circulation. But when it was a reserve currency 100 plus years ago, it purchased a lot more. It was gold, it was silver during our time, but yet it is still around in name, but it's not around in purchasing power. So the Federal Reserve note is subject to whether or not the central banking model continues, because the word dollar will still be around, but it won't be the same currency we have now, I believe, in my opinion. That's just my 2 cents. Backed. I see a lot of people talking about Backed. So Backed launches tomorrow. My initial thought on that is it's being positioned as a gateway for institutions to get in legally and be able to acquire for customers and things of that nature. But yet, once again, I'm hearing that they're going to actually settle in actual real Bitcoins as opposed to just futures, paper, or whatever. But my only concern with that is that everything, when it's initially rolled out, is rolled out in a way that it entices people and it persuades them that it's in the best interest for the market, and not that always doesn't remain the case. Example, fiat currencies. All fiat currencies were initially offered to the public as being backed by metals, but then as time went on, it becomes harder to manipulate and rig and to do things in your favor as an institution. And so eventually I could see back pulling off that, the exchanging actual real coins for paper as opposed to hypothecating, saying, we're going to give you paper contracts and shorts and all that type of crap. So I'm not gun-ho on Backed really becoming the savior for the cryptocurrency or a gateway for institutions, because the way that things are going currently, with this quantitative easing beginning, it itself will reassure that the monetary price of Bitcoin and everything else goes up, because as I mentioned earlier, as the liquidity spigot continues to flood, as it floods the institutions out and they have more than enough, that liquidity is going to overflow into something else. Cryptocurrency will be a recipient of that, as well as metals and everything else. So the Federal Reserve, in this last hoorah, this is the last hoorah for the Federal Reserve Bank as we know it, to keep this thing going, because once this expansion ends, that's all she wrote. So I anticipate, in my opinion, there being a reinflation of the current asset bubbles, housing, all types of debts, whatever, stock market especially. But then again, we're going to see new asset bubbles forming in different things. And I can see asset bubbles forming in cryptocurrencies, metals, and everything else. So everything is going to go up, because think about what happened. Think about what will happen when the Federal Reserve is caught in the midst of trying to bring into existence trillions. They're going to have to monetize the world in order to keep this expansion going. So this little balance sheet here, this shows their activity for the last 10 years. And the interesting part is they don't go any further back. Let me see. They don't go any further back than, let me see if it does. Nope. So this sheet here from the Federal Reserve doesn't go back any further than pre-Great Financial Crisis. So this is what they've been doing. This is what they've been doing in the last 10 years. In my opinion, what they're going to do in the next decade, from 2020 to 2030, is why I talk about all this not being put a price tag on the metal. Because if it's let me zoom in. If it's and this is outdated already as of Friday, if it's 3.8 trillion in existence right now, of which it's not out and about in the streets, imagine how they're going to keep this thing together this next decade. If we get to that point, this 3.84 going to easily turn into 12 trillion on their balance sheet. So a tripling of what they currently have now in order to keep this thing going. So imagine how many asset bubbles will form and all types of things. But the problem will be people will have the illusion, because we've been conditioned to look at things in dollar terms and thinking that, was it $100,000 Bitcoin is, man, I can't wait for 100,000 Bitcoin. Can you? You know what I'm saying? Like a $100,000 Bitcoin will be nothing in an environment where every other asset of its monetary based kind is also overly inflated, to where 100,000 Bitcoin could be considered the new version of a $10,000 Bitcoin. So once again, because of this easing process that's underway now, we're going to lose the true nature of how to value things in paper terms. And a great example would be, I don't have any handy, but I do have a book handy. It says, When Money Destroys Nations, and it's a flood of dollars, and it's about Zimbabwe. And so I've had him on the show, the author. But when you got hyperinflation kicking in, or inflation that increases steadily, and the denomination of notes increases to keep up with inflation, I can see possibly inflation getting out of hand, where they got to come out with another note or issue another currency, or it's going to be hard to put a price tag on things when things are going up steadily, like what happens in a hyperinflationary environment. So that's just my thought there. Hope that answered the question. James says, I like gold and silver, but you can't eat it. No currency of any kind is safe in a global meltdown. Thoughts? James, I would agree. I would agree with that. And so with that thought you just shared, another thought came to mind, and it's spiritual of nature, because depending on where you're at, like I mentioned, this next decade, 2020 to 2030, will be like something we've never witnessed, because it's going to be a makeup or a sorting out of a 10-year mess that we're currently in now. This artificial expansion will be sorted out in the next 10 years, but it's going to be a global event, because every nation's in the same boat. They've all inflated, and it's because of debt. $255 trillion of debt. And was it 60 trillion in sovereign debt has been brought into existence in 10 years just to patch up this past decade's mess, of that sovereign debt, 17 trillion is negative at this current point. So we all know about the negative debt. So more of that is coming. So debt is the reason why this next 10 years is going to be chaotic, because they're going to continue to monetize debt excessively, really distorting things. So that being the case, currency, back to our question, back to our thought. As a part in a spiritual nature, from a biblical standpoint, God says, put your wherever your heart is, that's where wherever your heart is, that's where your treasure will be. And so we're taught to think that we can prepare for something that we've never experienced before. And this is just my opinion. Your ultimate currency that will be your bread and butter should be your faith. And so I believe that, for me personally, the number one currency in existence, this goes beyond the natural, is your faith. Your faith is what will get you through difficult times. If you don't have faith, you don't have hope. You don't have hope, it's game over, because you have nothing to sustain you to get you to that next moment or next day if you don't have hope in something. So a lot of people in this next decade will lose hope because they don't know what's coming, A, and B, their faith will be tested. And so the number one currency, the number one asset you can have in a downturn is faith in your higher power, your source. For me personally, it's Jesus Christ, the Savior and King of humanity. But that's just me. So to answer your question, gold and silver can only do so much for you in your natural flesh. But yet, once again, it's not the end to be all, because it's one of the things where, it will not save you from what's currently underway. It can help you in a financial sense in the days ahead, but it won't save you. It will not get you through, because you can't eat it. You can't do much with it, but you need faith to get through, in my opinion, because that will provide your real daily provisions. So anyway, that's just my thought there, James. I appreciate you for sharing that. Queen says, Mike, what do you think will happen to laws like in Texas where gold and silver are actually legal tender? Whew, good question. My opinion is that I think I can, and I can see, depending on who's in office this next term also plays into the defining moments of our nation's future. Because if we get people in the power that naturally drift towards socialism, naturally drifts towards bigger government, more intervention, then they're going to make sure they do something with the Constitution to change some things in their favor. They're going to still look to remove arms from the American public. And therefore, because gold and silver, it is money, it keeps them from being able to expand operations. So they'll definitely address the states that have declared gold and silver legal tender again in their own states. So the Utahs, I think it's Utah, Texas, I think Wyoming, or there are 3 or 4 states that have made it officially law that you can use gold and silver for debts or whatnot. Those states will be dealt with in a sense where there's going to be some type of law or lawsuits or something. They're going to try to undo those laws. And so I can see them actually succeeding, because if they're giving out universal basic income and allowances and all stuff like that, they're going to say, what do people need gold and silver for? And the people who don't know the importance of gold and silver will definitely fall for that. And yeah, so that's just my thought, my initial thought on that. Good, great question. Appreciate that. Low blood pressure. It says, Mike, God hates debt-based monetary system because it includes interest in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. No doubt, low blood pressure. No doubt. Usury. Old Testament is, Old Testament is very, it's defined very well as to what God thinks about usury. And so within the Jewish customs, they always had debt jubilees. I think it's every 50 years you were obligated to forgive the debt. And so that allows a re-cleansing of the system, because you can just wipe away and give people a clean slate. And that's what we need now. But yet, because a lot of debt is privately held, it's somebody else's asset. So we can't just forgive everything. And governments can't forgive everything. So instead of forgiving it, they're going to inflate it away. And so, yeah. Got another call here.
Hey, Mike.
Hi there. How you doing, my friend? What's your name? Where you calling from?
Good, brother. It's Paul from South Philly. Good to hear you again, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you, Paul, for calling in. What's on your mind tonight?
Mike, you and I talked. I asked you a while back on the phone about, what caused your dive into this, and I remember it had to do with I think it was Lehman Brothers shares that you were gifted. Was that the story?
Bear Stearns.
Bear Stearns.
Yeah.
Oh, another excellent institution. I one of those moments again, but I just want to recant a quick story about inflation in the 70s, having lived through it as a young kid on his way to school. And the penny candy store, I would buy a Jolly Rancher ribbon candy for a penny. Later that week, it was a nickel, 500% increase. By the end of the 2 months, it was 35 cents. And we came home, me and my brothers and sisters, bitching and screaming to my mom, and she started laughing, saying, "You finally get what we're going through." So, and not too long after that, the dollar lost value, and it raced up to the 900 and intraday 900 price before Volcker really turned up the interest rates. I think we're going to see something like that again. What is your thought about that?
Whew, yeah. And so thanks for sharing that. I personally believe we will see things of that nature as well. And so that's what I'm talking about. This next 10-year time frame will be very indicative of what's to come. And so inflation, I think that, as I mentioned, the water spigot being turned on, it's going to spill over into consumer goods and consumer everyday lives. And we're going to see things like that. But my question, I don't know if it's going to be exponential, or like it's going to be like a slow progressive and then it's going to spike off. But yet it's no way that the Federal Reserve will be able to start QE4 continuous and it not spill over into our lives and impact it in every single way. So I just couldn't imagine, like, because when hyperinflation kicks in, the tendency is to raise interest rates. But yet, once again, you can't really raise interest rates because the entire globe will have issues. And then once again, who's going to be lending and borrowing when the entire globe is imploding? So they're going to have to address that, and they're going to have to forgive, forget, or come out with something else. And that's where, like, I don't know. but there's no way that this QE that's starting now, it will not end until this thing comes to a complete end completely. What that looks like, I don't know, but it's inevitable.
It's interesting because when when Volcker kind of regained faith in these outrageous interest rates for people holding dollars, I don't think they can do that again. I think the balance sheet and the confidence will be lost.
I agree.
To the point where no one's going to want the money, regardless of the promise to pay 20% on that, because the place we put ourselves in. So the fantasy that might happen again, I think, is something at risk that might make people feel complacent that it'll go back to normal. But I don't see a difference than you. You say 10, I say 15. I think it's going to be a 15. If you look at the Dow chart in the early 70s. For that 10-year period in the 70s, you'll see it kind of dip down, up, down, up. It didn't go anywhere. And I remember listening to the radio on my way to school when my dad would play it. Every day was down. The market was down every day. I'm like, who would invest in this stuff? No, thinking to that. So it's going to be 15 years.
Okay, I was trying to be nice with it, but I mean, hey, I wouldn't say it's impossible because we've never had a globally systemic event that's occurring now where all central banks are racing to the bottom, and there's no, I mean, what is the bottom when everyone's doing it? So, so I got the Dow Jones pulled up here now, and I try to check it out. And so speaking of interest rates,
if you look at the Fed, right, and you go to the purchasing power of the dollar and you zoom in at almost 50% loss in the first, from like 71 or 70 to 75. I don't have it in front of me, but you'll see a sharp slope in the dollar at that time. And you can imagine how quickly inflation going up is going to spool. We haven't really even seen real inflation before, and I think that's going to really kind of cause a lot more pain than people expect it to.
I agree.
That's just
I agree. And watch this. Speaking of which, interest rates, because something that's came to mind, like right now as we speak, Argentina's interest rate, their bank's interest rate is 78% right now. 78%. So you think like, man, 78%, like that would be and I have a friend down there, and so this is a couple months ago. I was asking him just how things were down on the ground, and he was saying that the banking interest rates to keep your money in their banks down there, they were given, I want to say it was like 30% interest on deposits. And so I'm thinking like, that sounds enticing, but I'm like, if your currency is going belly up, they're printing it at an alarming rate. There's no amount of interest in the world that would allow me that I would stay in that same currency. So think about 30% interest rates where we getting like 0.1 or 1 or 2% now, they're getting 30%. But yet if you get 30% in a worthless currency, what good is it?
Right. Well, even with Volcker, when he went up to almost 20%, the inflation was, higher than that when those bonds were issued. And people are like, well, why would I buy that bond? Inflation's killing me. And then, fortunately, we had a much better balance sheet. We had a lot more room to, assert dominance. It was the beginning of Fiat, not the end of Fiat. This is the end of Fiat.
Yeah, I like that.
Go to work.
This is the end of Fiat.
Last note, Mike, you said your person who wrote it was asking about when to So I wouldn't switch out of the gold until there was a reset, but I would consider when gold. I've heard this before. I'm curious in your thought. The price of gold, an ounce of gold, gets down to the price of the Dow Jones. In other words, let's say gold goes up to 10,000, the Dow gets down to 10,000. It's time to start switching assets into the Dow Jones. It's like single stock purchases, et cetera. What are your thoughts about that? I tell that to my family as a rule of thumb. To give them a game plan. But what's your thought?
I do agree with that, and so it's one of the things where the world will still need goods and services from companies that will be publicly listed. So that is a lot of investors are savvy enough to know when and how what. Me personally, not knowing it that well, I personally would still take my time because I don't even see the Dow Jones. I don't see commerce and trade picking up in a way where I'm going to be really excited to like, oh, let me go ahead and jump back in now. So it's one of the things where even at that point, the only thing you might be able to really count on is what you currently hold in your possession because you're getting back into the same system. And if it's being manipulated and controlled by the same entities, it's not in our favor. So I personally would just ride it out, and then eventually you got to do something, and I would look to probably buy tangible assets that then produce a great dividend or something that cash flows or digit flows or whatever is going to be given to us then, to where I would look into that stuff at that point. But I still got a lot of education to get on top of how to invest in that environment, because once again, it's going to be owning tangible things. So investing in Dow, that's not something I'm really thinking about as of now. But I have on here, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, but I'm saying I pulled up the Dow to gold ratio now, and so I know how Mike Maloney does the inverted versions or whatnot, and so I'm just showing it to public here. When it's high, when it's low. So definitely we are approaching a low right now. So it's 1730 as of August. So yeah. So if this little graph here, I'm not a trader or trend analyst, but it took 2 ounces of gold, or 2 ounces of gold in 1933. It was 1 ounce of gold in 1980. So I would imagine if I drew a little line here, it's damn sure, a half an ounce of gold might be able to get you something nice as far as a share of the Dow.
Right.
If you look at this trend. So yeah, hell, a tenth of an ounce might be if this thing goes down the way that the chart analysts be drawing them damn thing. So yeah, you could get a lot for very little in metal terms. So it'd be a no-brainer to probably drop an ounce of gold in it and get 10 shares, or something crazy like that. I don't know, but yeah, just my thoughts.
Right.
But
yeah, mine too, Mike. Listen, keep up the great work. I love you.
Appreciate it, my friend.
Keep the faith, brother.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. Thanks for calling in. Yeah, man. Good stuff. I appreciate that. So yeah, I figure it's about time to dial back. So I apologize. Start off tonight. Some technical difficulties. Got 15 minutes into the chat, me ranting. I said all types of stuff I can't go back and say it, but I try to fill it in once I got my volume going. But as always, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. So yeah, I just wanted to share my thoughts on this little thumbnail that I put out here, because I thought of this. I thought about payday lending is designed strategically by the institutions to sucker in those that don't know the difference of usury. So the interest rates on them type of loans is extremely high, and now we have it where this gentleman here is doing the same exact thing, but on a private level, where they're offering, it says instant approval for GSIB. So if you're too big to fail bank, you're instantly approved. We'll purchase, up to $75 billion a day. And because we know you don't have the funds, you don't have to pay us back. We won't tell nobody because it doesn't matter, because we're the central bankers of the world. And so I thought I would put this together because this is exactly what's going on, but on an institutional level, where it's a payday lending loan, but yet institutions ain't got to pay it back, because once again, just to show you that they don't have to pay it back, if you look at the very balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, these are all so-called assets that they've taken on. And so what they've done is the mortgage-backed securities, treasuries, all the fraudulent activity that the bankers were responsible for, this institution bought them off of them and then put this stuff on their balance sheet, and they put all the funds in an extra account that they're paying those banks money for. So you would think that they're the reasons that we're in this mess, that you would not give them more. And so these current mortgage-backed securities is tied in here, 1.7, whatever, I don't know how many trillion it is. Those things will never leave the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, because once again, where's the funds going to come from? So this additional stimulus is going out, will be added to this balance sheet. And then once again, where's the funds going to come from? Because the very nature, the very creation of these funds are brought into existence from nothing. So you have to bring in more from existence. You have to bring in more from out of nothing just to touch on what was already brought out. So it'll be a continued recycling, of which they're going to continue to add to the balance sheet. So this thing will only go up more and more and more. And so I'm going to end with saying this, and this is my opinion. Do your own homework, pray on it, do what you got to do. But to see quantitative easing become permanent, because this will go up to 11, 10, 12 trillion, however long the system stays in order. So China and Russia will determine how high this goes, because they're going to announce something that will make this obsolete, because the world will shift out east instantly once gold back comes into the equation. But as of now, they're going to continue to cut on a liquidity spigot, and knowing that there's going to be more funds brought into existence than will ever be able to repay back, I think it'll be very irresponsible. And this is my opinion, so just take it for a grain of salt. It'll be very irresponsible to continue to do what you're currently doing now as far as the practical financial matters, like the whole idea of getting out of debt. If the Democratic Party gets their candidate in there, Biden, whoever, or Bernie or Warren, they're going to be forgiving debt. So that's going to be a whole nother issue there. So yeah, debtors win moving forward if you're using that debt for productivity, and savers lose because you're working hard and saving and setting it aside, anticipating compounding interest in an environment where they're compounding the monetary supply. So yeah, this is all my opinion and thoughts. Take it for what it's worth. But then I want to end on this. Everybody remember this game, right? Everybody remember this game, Monopoly. The whole Monopoly game was brought into existence during the Great Depression, or before the Great Depression, became popular during the Great Depression because there was a single source of income. There's a single source of issuer, the banker. Whoever controlled the bank could always make the final decisions. And so that very game is relevant now. We're in a real world monopoly where the Federal Reserve is the banker, and they're dishing out $75 billion a day to their buddies to keep the game going. Because if the game stops, it's all she wrote. So this is a real world game that's coming true right now in our very eyes. So I'm gonna leave it at that. But for those that have been watching, I appreciate you spending some time with me. For those that got in late, you didn't miss much because there was no volume. And other than that, be blessed, be safe, stay prayed up. And more importantly, if you've enjoyed the back and forth, don't be afraid to donate a thumbs up. Just hit that button right beneath here, or thumbs down, either one, whatever floats your boat. And then cash, gold, opportunity, all the resources you need beneath this video here to educate yourself. Share this information with your friends, because this is what's happening is they're about to print religiously, and people are still going to do what they've been doing all along, which is to work hard and save in things that will inflate in nominal value, of course, but the substance of them will be swept out from underneath, because there will be a day of reckoning where this stuff comes to an end. And when it does come to an end, you won't be left holding much other than what you physically can hold or physically owned outright, because that's just my thoughts there. But I'm leaving it at that. Be blessed, be safe, get your weight up, and I will see you guys later. Peace.